God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows.
So I'll say welcome and I'll say good afternoon because it's not the morning anymore. I'm Kathy and I'm a team member of the Family Resource Initiative where we practice daily ways to help others navigate their life curves. And so we're located right across the hall if you're interested to know more about us. You have a pamphlet in the basket on your table, and it does explain everything, mostly everything that we do. Each Thursday, the Family Resource puts on Lunch and Learns, bringing different topics and various well-versed speakers to our local community. And our time is recorded, so just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, we do have a Q&A at the end. Please either let me get to you with a microphone so that it'll be part of the recording for those who couldn't make it, or Emma will repeat your question just for that whole reason that we want it on the recording. And then you also have these cards in your basket. These are important to us. This tells us if we need to improve on anything or how we did something really, really well. So if you'd fill this out at the end, that would be great. Today's speaker is our very own Emma Teal. Emma began as Wooddale Senior High Associate in August of 2020. And since then, she served as the Senior High Director. Is that correct? Emma is passionate about connecting young people with Christ through community and discipleship, and she enjoys every single opportunity she gets with her students. She's educated in elementary education as well as theology. Yeah. So we are very fortunate to have her not only on staff, but to have her here today to talk about some of the best ways that you could create family time and parenting skills and incorporate all of that, family-centered environment, without necessarily just paying attention to only the children, but to all the dynamics of what goes into making a family, right? Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emma. Thank you so much for coming today. We just love having you here. It's so good of you. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me with just my voice, or would you prefer that I... Oh, I have to. Okay, got it. Hello, everyone. I will be using the microphone. Sorry I asked. Thank you for the warm welcome, Kathy, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. I am continuously so humbled and honored by opportunities like this. I was just saying to some of the staff in the Family Resource Initiative that I think back to like 13 years ago when I myself was a student here at Wooddale Church, and I did not anticipate the redemption arc within my story that God would provide. I never anticipated that I would be doing what I'm doing today, but I am so thankful and continuously humbled to do what I get to do. Currently, I oversee our senior high ministry here at Wooddale Church, which is our grades 10 through 12. And this is my 4th school year doing that, and I love every moment of it. It is such a sweet season of students' lives to walk alongside them, but it's also a really challenging season too. And so with that, lots of highs and lows, but it's a gift every day to be able to do ministry with high school students, and specifically here at Wooddale Church. Today, my topic is regarding fostering a family-centered environment within your home, within your family. And I want to provide some specific disclaimers for you because I find that they can kind of be helpful with contextualizing what you are about to hear. My first disclaimer is that I am not a licensed anything. I am not a licensed counselor, therapist, parent specialist. I have no letters before or after my name. I just happen to have a passion for families and a passion for parenting and structures of family dynamics. And so just know that this is not necessarily professional help or support, but rather just a young woman that's passionate about families and parenting. Second disclaimer is that I do work in youth ministry, and so my presentation style is much more informal and conversational, and I will have you turn and talk with the people around you. So if you don't know the people around you, you will get to know them by the end of the day today. We'll also be watching some fun videos and making some jokes together too, because that is my typical format. Third disclaimer, I'm not a parent, so also not an expert in that category as well, but I feel very fortunate to have awesome parents myself and to also be able to walk alongside some really great parents within our senior high ministry here. And so lots of experiences that will be discussed today are either in regards to my own personal experiences within my kin, within my family, or experiences that I have been able to observe or walk alongside in the senior high ministry. And then my fourth and final disclaimer is that I originally titled this Lunch and Learn as How to Foster a Family-Centered Environment. I actually just shifted it to be called Fostering a Family-Centered Environment to get rid of the how-to get rid of the pressure on myself to solve and to fix everything, but rather to be an encouragement to you all today with just some new things to consider and some new thoughts for you in whatever family and parenting or grandparenting or being an aunt and uncle or being a caretaker looks like for you. So I ex-nayed the how-to, and we're just gonna have a conversation today about this idea of having a family-centered environment. This tech in here is beyond advanced, by the way, people, so cool. I would be remiss to not show you a picture of my amazing family, since we'll be talking about family today. My family consists of my mom and dad, Stephanie and Jim in the middle there, and then I'm the oldest of 3 kids, my younger brother Graham in the gray, and my younger sister Grace in the striped blouse. We all attend Wooddale Church here together, which is such a special thing. We started attending Wooddale Church back at around 2010, and it's been sweet that as us 3 kids have finished college, all of us have come back here to Wooddale Church, and to be able to worship together and serve together as a family is awesome. If you know any of the other Teal family members, they're all a lot cooler than me, and so if you're already like, wow, she's really cool, the other 4 are even cooler. So that is my wonderful family to give you a visual. To set the scene for today in talking about a family-centered environment, I thought it would be helpful to just show a visual aid of some different parenting styles that we oftentimes see and that we oftentimes see different psychologists presenting. This particular 4 parenting styles structure was developed by Diana Baumrind, who's a developmental psychologist, in addition to a couple of researchers at Stanford University. And together they put together these 4 parenting styles that range in regards to the level of demandingness or the level of authority, you could say, or what is asked of children within the family, and also a spectrum of responsiveness, so the ways in which and the level in which parents are responsive towards their children and vice versa. And from that, they put together 4 different parenting styles. We see the permissive parenting style, which is pretty child-driven, where there are rarely any rules that are either given or enforced. We see the neglectful parenting style, in which oftentimes parents are seen as rather uninvolved or hands-off in regards to parenting their children. The authoritarian parenting style is very parent-driven, where we see that there are a lot of set, strict rules, and they are enforced to an extreme. And then lastly, an authoritative parenting style, in which problems are typically solved and rules are typically established together between children and parents. For the sake of our conversation today, I'm going to be transferring or translating these parenting styles into 3 different parenting approaches, and that would be parent-centered, child-centered, and family-centered. If you were to look at this structure that was developed by those at Stanford University, the parent-centered approach would fall more in the bucket of authoritarian. A child-centered approach would fall in the bucket of being more permissive. And then a family-centered approach, I would argue, is rather authoritative-esque, I will say. So that will be our terminology that we will be working with today: parent-centered, child-centered, and family-centered. But I also wanted to provide you with some contextual research to support different parenting styles that will be referenced as well. I keep forgetting that I'm in charge of this. To compare, on a high level, these three different parenting approaches, and I want you to be thinking about this personally, because after we go over this, you're going to turn and talk with your people at your table about something. But at a high level, the emphasis and the priorities within these three different approaches to parenting, parent-centered parenting is really centered around a hierarchy in which parents hold a dominant role in decision-making and setting rules, and children are expected to follow these directions and these rules. Oftentimes, there are very traditional roles found in parent-centered approaching, where parents are the primary decision-makers and caretakers and rule setters and disciplinarians. And the emphasis within parent-centered parenting would be on authority, and that parents have all of the authority or most of the authority and control within the family unit and how the family is structured. In comparison, child-centered parenting provides for child autonomy, in which children are typically encouraged to express their needs and their opinions and their interests. They're encouraged to be the leaders in terms of making decisions and pursuing their interests. Child-centered parenting typically is rather flexible, given the fact that children are driving a little more often than adults. This is a more permissive approach in the sense that children are allowed to do things that are more flexible in regards to rules and routines. And then the emphasis within child-centered parenting oftentimes is happiness and ensuring that the children within the family are experiencing happiness and a high sense of confidence and well-being. Lastly, what I'll present to you is this family-centered parenting approach, where mutual respect is established between parents and children. Shared responsibilities exist in regard to taking care of the home and taking care of the family unit. So responsibilities and chores are things that are shared amongst family members, which helps to foster an ownership of every family member, regardless of their hierarchy. And then lastly, the emphasis within family-centered parenting would be that of collaboration. Where decision-making and communication is something where both children and parents work together through the lens of collaboration, considering the needs and the interests of both parent and child. And so one could argue that family-centered parenting is just a blend of parent and child-centered parenting together, but actually it has a uniqueness in the sense that there isn't necessarily a super firm understanding of who sets the rules and who is always making decisions. There will be instances within a family unit where parents are certainly establishing those things, but then there will be instances where children are establishing those things or leading the way in those things. And so it's not necessarily this perfect blend between parent-centered and child-centered, but it does take some different attributes and work to meet in the middle. And so with this high-level overview of parent-centered, child-centered, and family-centered approaches to parenting, my question for you at your table, you get to talk with the people around you, is what approach did your parents or your caretakers utilize during your childhood? Go ahead and talk with the people at your table. Unless you were going to move? You can move. Okay, let's sit together. What's your name, by the way? Rick, nice to meet you. I'm Emma. Yeah. Do you go to Wooddale here? I do. You do?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm a sixth grader and fourth grader.
Oh,
Just
sweet.
think about my time in there.
Awesome. What's your last name?
Kaufman?
Kaufman.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So,
Awesome. So
but
1 and 5, 6 already.
Yep.
but not quite to senior high.
Not yet, not yet. But I thought I was like, oh, that's pretty good. So
Totally, that's awesome. Well, it's great to meet you.
likewise.
So, what approach do you feel like your parents or caretakers took during your childhood?
I was pretty much the parent centered.
Okay.
I'd say there was, again, there's probably a flavor of child at times, but it was much more of an emphasis on keeping mom happy.
Yes.
So
Mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
that was very evident in my family.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah. So I'd say now though with my family we're probably more, I think more that family centered. Probably more a little bit of the parent slash family.
Yep.
Yeah. See how it's interesting. How about yourself? Was your family was?
Yeah, with my family, I do think early on it was certainly very parent-centered.
Yeah.
A huge part of my family's testimony is my parents didn't become believers until I was like 5 or 6.
Okay.
And so I think they were really functioning out of a place of like, this is kind of what the world says
This is
to
what
do,
we know.
so whatever. But it's been really cool because as they grew in their faith, I think during especially like my teenage years and college years, we saw this shift of this family-centered approach. And later on, I'll share examples of that. But just where our parents viewed us also as like upstanding human beings.
Yes.
But then also that us kids had an understanding that like mom and dad matter too.
Yep.
And like their hobbies matter too.
Yep.
They have needs and wants.
They're
and they don't
human.
just cater to us.
We're not serving every women.
Yeah.
I feel like we're, as you describe that, I feel like we're probably just naturally going that direction a little bit more with my kids as they're now, older and, and I think early on, I guess I'll just say is I think I see so many with littles,
Yep.
the child center, and I'm like, and personally I feel like, no, like you set the boundaries of discipline and then you can, if you say no early, then when you say yes, it means something. But if they know they'll always get a yes out of you, if they just badger you, you're screwed. So like my kid, they're not perfect, but I get a lot of compliments on them because they're really well behaved because we expect that and we don't let them go crazy. And Amy Stanley had a great talk on it once, and they said, he's like, if when they're older, you're trying to discipline. Like now they're like, who are you on this? Whereas if you discipline here, you should be able to adjust and coach in that, to your point, kind of transition in that family center. So I feel like we're kind of having more of that dynamic. Like we don't really have hard beds at times. My almost 12, is like he's a night owl like me. So we stay up a little later. I'm like, you're tired. They're like, bedtime. You might like, I'm like, no, it's time to bed. Okay. Do you understand why? Because you're tired. And so I think there's that, we don't have to come out hardcore discipline if I think the mutual respect and conversation. Yeah.
And understanding the why is a huge thing too.
I have to remind my
Oftentimes, like parent-centered, usually, like if you just say no,
I'm the
the
boss.
kids are like, well, I'm gonna resent that. But if you explain why,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's-
interesting.
My wife is good about like challenging me. She goes, you have to get context because I can be quick with you.
Sure.
So I revert back to that. But yeah, it's exactly. My 11-year-old is always like, I'm confused, which tells me like you don't like what the answer is. But okay, and how much is this? You're choosing confusion versus let's talk. Let's talk.
Totally. I could chit chat with you like all
I'm
day.
sure we could. I look forward.
All right, take a few more seconds to wrap up your conversations. My least favorite thing with the high schoolers is cutting them short because they could jibber jabber all day. Curious, a raise of hands in the room. Who would say that you grew up in a rather parent-centered home? Okay, I kind of figured that would be the majority. Who would say they grew up in a child-centered home or flavors of it even? Interesting. And then anyone in a more parent or a family-centered home? Okay. Nice. Good. Sorry, I should have raised my hand too. I'm with you. Very interesting. I think One of the reasons why I wanted you to talk about this at your table is because it's so helpful to contextualize these things back to your own childhood and back to your own experiences, right? If we just talk about concepts and never make things personal, it can be really hard to put them into practice. But then the second thing that's so interesting is because I was excited to take a raise of hands because I think we do see a generational shift going on in parenting and family dynamics. I think, like we saw, the majority of you grew up in very parent-centered homes, and many of you can probably see that right now we're seeing a huge surge of child-centered homes. And what I would like to say is that there isn't necessarily one correct, and this is exactly what you should do in regards to your parenting approach, but rather that these different parenting approaches, they offer different benefits, they offer different effects that they will end up having on your children. But for today, kind of talking specifically about the family-centered approach and the ways in which that can have a positive influence on your family. I gotta remember to use this thing. I want to show you a couple videos of some fun families that you might be familiar with. Anyone have experience watching Full House with the lovely Tanner family? So good. And then everybody loved the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory Willy Wonka movies. Oh yeah, okay. We have two families here that the Full House is a TV show if you're not familiar with it. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, a movie. I want to show you videos of these two different family dynamics and just have you think through what different parenting approaches you're observing from this and enjoy the humor within each video. So Mark, do you want to play the Full House video first?
Now, who would like to review the rules?
Me.
Stephanie?
This is a talking stick. Only the person that holds it can talk, okay? Now that I have your attention, Christmas will be coming soon. I'm getting bigger. My bike is getting smaller.
Now, who would like to start?
I'll start. Dad, Joey had no right to try to ground me when I have a karate tournament. Dad, tell Joey he can't do that.
DJ, you know that when I'm not here, I turn over all responsibility for you three girls to Uncle Jesse and Joey.
Dad, that punishment is way too unfair. Cheating, no stick. That wasn't talking, that was explaining.
DJ, I think the reason this is so hard for you is because it's the first time Joey's really put his foot down.
I have to say that I side with Joseph 100%. You do the crime, you do the time. You pay the piper, you face the music, man. You got to bite the book. I've been watching too many old movies.
This meeting is not fair. Everyone's against me. Dad, do something.
Joey's decision is final.
How can you do this to me?
DJ, I'm not doing anything to you.
That's
exactly what
it's
he's
not fair. It's not fair.
Stop it! I hate to see everyone fighting. Now just sit down and listen to what I have to say. Danny, you told me that if I put my foot down, the girls would respect me. Now DJ hates me and my foot. DJ was the one who came in late without calling. Why are you blaming yourself? Because this whole thing started when I tried to be Mr. Discipline. That's not me. The best part about being in this family is all the love and all the great times we had together. My family was always fighting. I don't want to go through that again.
Well, Joseph, there's no such thing as a family that doesn't fight. I mean, even Herman Munster yelled at poor little Eddie once in a while.
Look, Joey, the love, the fun, the responsibility, the discipline, they all go together. When you're in this family, you're in all the way. You did the right thing. DJ deserved to be punished. Am I right, DJ?
Okay, I give up. I won't go to my karate tournament. But if you're waiting for me to be happy about it, it won't happen.
I'll go talk to her. No, I'll go talk to her.
I have here the names of everyone who talked without the stick.
All right, and then the next video is going to be about a family called the Salt family. Veruca Salt is a character in the Willy Wonka series. So take a look at this family.
Veruca. Can you spell that for us, please?
Veruca. Veruca Salt.
As soon as my little Veruca told me she had to have one of these golden tickets, I started buying up all the Wonka bars I could lay my hands on. Thousands of them. Hundreds of thousands. I'm in the nut business, you see, so I say to my workers,
Morning, ladies. From now on, you can stop shelling peanuts and start shelling the wrappers off these chocolate bars instead.
3 days went by and we had no luck. It was terrible. My little Veruca got more and more upset each day.
Where's my golden ticket? I want my golden ticket!
well, gentlemen, I just hated to see my little girl feeling unhappy like that. I vowed I would keep up the search until I could give her what she wanted. And finally, I found her a ticket.
Daddy, I want another pony.
The best part about Russell stickers.
Whoa. All right. So with those two examples, I think it's pretty evident if you were to categorize those families pretty quickly. But just to give you kind of some humor in this, Veruca Salt, the character in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, as you can see, felt extremely entitled to receiving whatever it is that she wanted, but you also observed too that her parents were willing to do whatever it took in order for their child to be happy. And while that was obviously a very extreme thing, and I don't think any of you own a nut factory, and if you do, super cool. But we see that this family essentially revolved around Veruca and whatever it is that she wanted, which produced XYZ in Veruca's character and in her attitude towards her parents. But then we saw with the Tanner family in the show Full House that while there was certainly challenges and difficulties that they were experiencing, and Joey, who's he's the best friend, or is Uncle Jesse the best friend? Joey's the best friend, and Uncle Jesse is the uncle, hence, yeah. But we see that Joey disciplined DJ. She didn't really like it so much, but they had a system in place where all of the family members would sit down to discuss whatever happened or whatever challenge that is, allowing for everyone in the family to be able to have a voice in the conversation. And while at the end of the day with this talking stick scene, not everyone was necessarily super happy, and it wasn't something that was always a feel-good experience, we see that there was resolution that was provided, and then at the end of the day, Joey was able to explain his feelings, DJ was able to explain her feelings, and they were able to move on, much thanks to is it Stephanie? Much thanks to, what's her name? The little one, Stephanie, right? Much thanks to Stephanie's humor as well, that added to it. But to provide you just a couple of examples and what we can observe from these families. So what I notice from these two families, but then also from research that we see from different parenting approaches as well, is that a child-centered parenting approach considers the needs and the interests and the well-being of the children. And here's what I want to say with this. That is a good thing. To consider the needs, interests, and well-being of your children is something that you should never, ever feel bad about, something you should never, ever shy away from. You should always, always consider the needs and interests and well-being of your children, okay? But what the family-centered parenting considers, I have typos, so forgive me, is the needs, the interests, and the well-being of the entire family. And so not just the needs, interests, and well-being of just the children in the family, but also the parents or caretakers in the family as well, which ultimately fosters an environment in which everyone feels like they matter, and they know that they matter too, that their needs, their interests, and their well-being are cared for and considered and a part of conversations in the family. And ultimately, these two different approaches ask two different questions. A child-centered parenting approach asks the question, what's best for my kids? What's best for my children? And a family-centered parenting approach asks the question, what's best for my whole family? When I'm considering all the different people in my family and the needs, the interests, and the well-being of each person in this family unit, what's best for my whole family? So getting into a couple more specifics in regards to a family-centered environment. When I use the verb play, what I mean by play here is the hobbies and the interests and the things that people like to do with their time. So just to describe that verb a little bit more for you. Within a family-centered environment, we see that playing with your children the way that they want to is a great thing. You should certainly sit down and play with race cars with your young children, and you should certainly participate in video games if you're up for trying to learn a new techie thing, or you should go along with your children in whatever sports they enjoy doing. But then also inviting children into parents' play, and again, what I mean by play is the hobbies and the interests and the things that parents are engaged in. There's a sharing of responsibilities and decision-making within a family-centered environment. There's making sacrifices when appropriate to prioritize the family unit. And then ultimately, I don't remember if, okay, yeah. Ultimately, in a family-centered environment, we see that it puts the family as the system that you work to serve and nourish together. So the family unit isn't just something that the parents are responsible for serving and nourishing, but that children are also a part of this process as well. And ultimately, what this helps do is it develops a collaborative environment in which the parents are not at the kids' costs and the kids are not at the parents' costs, but rather when you're experiencing teamwork together, again, you're able to ask that question, what's best for my whole family? And every person in the family is able to see that their needs and their interests and their well-being matter, and that there's not one group. You could say parents and children are two different groups. There's not one group that necessarily is more important than the other. If I can be candid with this, sometimes what we see in a child-centered home is that it may give the impression to your children that people, or their parents, but then further out than just in their home, that people are just here to serve you and provide for you whatever it is that you want. We saw that with Veruca Salt, and the sad reality is that we also are seeing this in children as well as they grow to be young adults and hopefully be upstanding citizens. But sadly, in a child-centered home, a lot of times, the children don't get that many opportunities or chances to be able to give, to serve, and to sacrifice, right? And again, I want to make sure that everyone knows that your children, it is important to care for them, and it is very important to put their needs and interests and well-being as a priority. But what will happen when we lean so far in the direction of a child-centered home is that these people, and I work with a lot of these people, these wonderful high schoolers that I work with, that are working on whatever's next for them after high school, sadly haven't been given opportunities to work together within their family unit, and then they go off to college or whatever's next for them after high school with the assumption that life is all about me, and everyone in this room has learned that life actually isn't all about me, right? But when you are growing up in a home where it seems like everything is about you, right, it makes sense then that you grow up to be an adult with the same assumption. But if we can do a better service to our children and to our grandchildren or whoever is in your family unit by ensuring that children are a part of this family as a system and that everyone is working together to serve and nourish the family unit, that better sets up our children for success when they go off to be roommates and when they go off to be teammates in college, or when they go off to have their own family someday, or whatever it may be, when they go off and get their first job and have to work on a team, when they have already had practice with these things in their home. We see both with research, but I think you can also all look around too. We see that these children are much better suited for the world and having a better perspective on the world as being a collaborative thing when they're able to grow up in a family-centered home. I want to share some examples with you all of some ways in which I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a family-centered environment to make this more practical for some of you. And maybe some of you are like, oh yeah, me too. And then maybe these will spark some things for you as well of some ideas. My dad, if you know him, Jim Teal, he loves to snowmobile. For as long as I've known my dad, I've known that he's loved to snowmobile. That's his hobby, that's his thing. And actually, he, every winter, like between December and March, say, he'll go up to the cabin like almost every single weekend that he could to be able to snowmobile with his friends. And I remember growing up, you would think that some kids would be like, man, why is my dad always gone? Or like, why is he like dipping? Granted, okay, he wasn't gone like every single weekend, but he was gone like enough to be noticeable, right? But what I remember, because of the environment that we were growing up in, is that we actually celebrated that my dad had this hobby that he loved. Like, it was so cool to me and my siblings that my dad was so into snowmobiling. And the second thing that was so cool about it is that he snowmobiled with his friends, like recognizing that my parents had friends and they had other people in their lives beyond just me and my siblings. And so my dad, for as long as I can remember, has prioritized this hobby of snowmobiling and making sure that he gets to the cabin as many times as he can when appropriate for what the family needed, and also did it with his friends too. And that's something still to this day that he prioritizes. And I'm so thankful for that, because it showed me then that my dad really felt like his needs and his interests were also a priority in our family. Now with that, what's really special is that we would get the invitation to snowmobile with Dad. Once or twice each winter, Jim Teal would be like, all right, what weekend works for all the kids to come up and snowmobile with Dad? And my mom would come along too, and it would be a family event together. But what was special about it, right, is again, it was kind of my dad's thing. And it was his thing that he was so excited about, something that he spent time on, and something that we were invited into. Again, inviting your children into parents' play or hobby. That was really, really special. Another example, I grew up playing volleyball, and so I had a volleyball tournament literally every single weekend from middle school all through college. And because of that, I wasn't able to attend Sunday morning church. And so you would think, okay, maybe the rest of the family would just go to Sunday morning church and Emma just misses out every week. What was really special is that my family was willing to make a sacrifice. They were willing to make a shift in their schedule on a weekly basis. And instead of attending Sunday morning services where I wouldn't have been able to participate because I was playing volleyball, we found Wooddale Church that at the time had a Sunday evening service, and together as a family we prioritized attending the Sunday evening service, so all 5 of us were worshiping together as opposed to one person missing out. I recognize that that produced some different shifting and some different sacrificing within my family unit that required for people to change their schedules or change their habits, but that was prioritized, and what that showed me is that people were supportive of me in my hobby of volleyball, but also that my parents were like, this is something that we're gonna do together, and we're gonna find a way for that to be something that no one's gonna miss out on, even if it means shifting schedules. We had shared chores and responsibilities in the home. We received allowance, which I know is kind of like people are hit or miss with that these days, but we received allowance for the contributions that we made to upkeeping our home. And we also understood that caring for our home was an all-hands-on-deck thing. Whenever we would get a dog growing up, our parents would be like, well, are you going to help? right? Like, are you gonna like help take care of the dog? And we would have to say, well, yeah, of course, because if we would have said, well, no, that's a mom and dad thing, I would imagine we would be dogless. And so that's an example of a shared responsibility. Another one that's kind of goofy, my sister does not like scary movies, and so as a family, we don't watch scary movies when my sister is around, right? Like, when my sister would maybe be off with her friends, then me, my brother, and my parents would watch a scary movie. But why would we watch a scary movie when Grace doesn't really like them and she feels uncomfortable watching them? My older brother isn't a big fan of card games, but he's willing to cave at times because he knows that it's important to spend quality time together. And so even though he's a little reluctant with it, he'll make a huge sacrifice and sit down for a game of cards for 45 minutes. My parents encouraged us in our hobbies. We marveled in our parents and their hobbies. And I will say that as my parents are now even they are empty nesters, we marvel in them even more in the hobbies that they enjoy and the interests that they have and the things that they participate in, which is showing me as their child that their life did not end when their children went off and started living their life, but rather that parents are individuals too. All of the people within a family unit are important and that all these different things matter. So those are a couple of examples. One highlight that I also wanted to point out as well is this idea of commitment over compliance. This is more so in particular to a parent-centered environment, where oftentimes we see that in a parent-centered environment, children are communicated with about specific rules and regulations and routines that they must follow, but a lot of times they're not given the why of why that exists. But in a family-centered environment, when you're willing to bring children into that conversation, we see that children are able to shift from just compliance and shift into an area of commitment. So teaching compliance without the why will produce resentment, but teaching compliance with the why will produce commitment. So for example, why do you have your children go to bed at a specific time? Because they're tired. I'm taking that quote from you, Rick. Or why do you have a specific curfew that you give your children? Because it's probably unsafe to be out at 2 a.m. Or why should children participate in chores around the house? Oh, well, I don't know, you live here too, right? Like giving an explanation for why certain things are in place helps produce commitment within the family unit, as opposed to feeling like there's no reasoning or just parents like to use their authority, but bringing children into those conversations is really sweet. I was listening to a podcast that used the phrase that parenting is a loving course from compliance to commitment. Kids need to do what you're asking out of compliance. There are certain things like don't touch the burning stove, or, make sure that when you take your dog for a walk, you actually put it on a leash. Like there are certain things where it's just like common sense, of course. But if we only teach compliance without the why, and if we don't explain our yeses and our nos, then there won't be any commitment. And if we're saying yes whenever we can, children are able to see that their asks and their requests are important, but when no's are given, an explanation to those is extremely helpful as well. With all of this, some of these things you can probably infer, but generally speaking, from research, we see that some of the effects of family-centered parenting are producing a positive parent-child relationship, that mutual respect that you see in a family-centered approach, a love for one another, a care for one another, an adoration for one another. Effective communication and giving your children opportunities to practice having conversations that are hard and yucky and not fun and clunky, like the talking stick of the Tanner family, whatever that looks like. But to be able to practice that is such a positive thing for children and also for parents as well. Shared decision-making, family resilience, long-term impact on child development, like we talked about previously. Children are better able to have a more collaborative world view and understanding that everyone matters rather than just kids or like just me. And then the intergenerational impact is really special as well, too. I feel, like I said, really fortunate that I've grown up in a home that's very family-centered, and I look forward someday to being able to put that into practice in my own family so that generations upon generations to come have this mutual respect and mutual adoration. And this understanding that families are meant to be a unit that works together. So that's really, really exciting. And the last thing I want to offer to you is just, again, some tangible ways in which you could foster this within your own families. Some of these are going off of my own personal experiences, but others are more general. Family meals are huge. They are huge. You might not be able to have a family meal together every single day, but when we were growing up, we would have Sunday night family dinners. It would be after our Sunday service, and they were chaotic. I'm talking like they were crazy. 2 hours long, sitting at the table, jibber-jabbering about Lord only knows what, because everyone took a turn going around the table talking about highs and lows and buffaloes and all those things. And that's truly one of my favorite family traditions that I look back on, that was prioritized, that it was like, yeah, you have homework and mom and dad have to pay the bills, but like we're all sitting down and sharing a meal together. Producing time for that allowed for all of us to have a space to spend time together, to just talk, to just be, right? To just be a family unit. You might have other traditions that would be applicable as well. Giving children a role in running the household is huge. I don't know what chore that is. I don't know what responsibility that is. I don't know if they're the primary caretaker for your fish. But a role in running the household helps produce ownership within children. That can be extremely beneficial when they become adults someday. Playing together and supporting others in their play, like the examples I shared of my family, and whatever that looks like in your family too. Learning to serve one another and make specific sacrifices or be willing to adjust or shift according to what might be best for the family. Establishing effective communication. And then the last thing I wrote, I didn't put it on the slide, but attending worship service as a family is like huge. Figuring out whatever that looks like for your family, but sitting down together in that pew or sitting down together wherever it is, however the chairs are aligned. But attending a worship service together as a family is a huge thing as well to be prioritized to ensure that children and parents alike are practicing their faith and growing together in their faith. So the question to leave you all with and have you just thinking of is really, how can you then foster a family-centered environment within your context? I'd imagine there are some empty nesters in the room. I'd imagine there are some people with young children in the room, some people who are grandparents in the room, some people who maybe live solo currently. Whatever your context looks like and whatever your living situation looks like and how often you see your family or you don't, maybe you have chosen family but they're not blood family, but what are ways in which you can foster an environment where rather than just asking the question, what's best for the kids, asking the question, what's best for the whole family unit in order to work together to nourish and serve that system together. And as encouragement, the best encouragement there is, God's word. We see in Deuteronomy, this is Moses' encouragement to the Israelites. In all of chapter 6 of Deuteronomy is like really good, by the way, but specifically I love these two verses in regards to raising a family and parenting. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 7 say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. what sweet encouragement that is, that ultimately at the end of the day, as parents or caretakers or whatever that looks like for you, God ultimately just calls for us to impress upon these commandments to our children. And so that's going to look different with different parenting approaches and different methods and strategies. At the end of the day, this is the most important thing, that we impress these things on our children. But I am certainly a firm believer that fostering a more family-centered approach where we're all working together is something that can produce some really sweet things within your family. And I'm excited for a potential wave of this approach occurring within family units, and just what that will look like for this next generation that we are currently pouring into and investing in. And so thank you to each and every one of you, in whatever that looks like, in whatever ways that you are currently investing in the next generation, meaning the generation behind you. It doesn't have to be a little kid, but whatever generation is younger than you, thank you for what you are doing to invest in those people and pour into them, so that ultimately we can be developing a collaborative, beautiful world where we're all working together. So that's what I have. I think we're doing question and answer now. You might have questions. We'll see if I have answers.
Yeah. Does anybody have a question that she might be able to answer for you? Come on, don't be shy. Good.
So it seems, pretty common sense to me to have a more of a family-centered dynamic in the household. What are some reasons do you think some families gravitate towards either a parent-centered approach or a child-centered approach?
Great question, Adrian. I'm friends with Adrian, by the way. I think it seems like it's common sense to have a family-centered environment, but I also think it's harder to have a family-centered environment because the more voices that you bring into the equation, the more it can get sticky and challenging to navigate. And so that's where a parent-centered approach or a child-centered approach can seem easier or less challenging to navigate, because it seems like there's less people who are driving the ship or directing the conversations or whatnot. But with a family-centered approach, when you give every single person a voice, that can be a lot of people if you got 10 kids, in comparison to parent-centered or child-centered. That would be my take.
Would you say some of that is built on modeling that you've had or seen in your own life, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
we bring that into our circumstances
Yeah.
and situations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, so many of you raised your hands that you grew up in a parent-centered environment, and so much of our behavior is because of our family of origin. And so it's just natural that you would just repeat the cycle, right? Because it's what you know. And a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. I know that's really profound. But a lot of times we put into practice the things that we're familiar with, so that's why things become so cyclical. But if people are willing to kind of break out of the box and dabble in some new territories, that's exciting too. But it is a little more challenging.
Have you read Madeline Levine, Teach Your Children Well?
How do I say this? I was assigned to read that book in college. That's what I'll say. It's probably a fantastic book. I just wasn't an avid reader in college, but it's on my bookshelf.
Yeah. How about Dr.
What do you know about it?
So she's just a wonderful. She writes the book Price of Privilege, Teach Your Children Well, and then she's Ready, Set, Go. I think dealing with anxiety. So she's a wonderful resource, 30 years experience, and I think she's a keynote for a lot of kids. Here's another name, Dr. Robert Lewis. Yeah, you mentioned a family getting together and talking. The research is that our life satisfaction, our happiness comes from a close-knit family. Yeah, it's based on those times of emotional connection around the table, and that's being just taken out of our society. Where did you get that fact? Because I was like, sweet, that's it.
I have been working on my capstone for grad school, and I have been considering this topic as my capstone. or just family of origins in general. And so that's where I came upon that. Yeah.
Did I see someone over here with a question? I thought I did.
Oh, right
Oh,
here.
Adrian's back.
Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between authoritative and authoritarian?
I would be happy to. The big thing between authoritative and authoritarian in parenting styles, if you look on the left side of this chart or visual aid, it's really the level of responsiveness that parents have to their children, and you could say vice versa, but it's specifically regarding the parents' level of responsiveness to their children. And so within an authoritative parenting approach, that's typically where you see that rules are set, and regardless of a child's response or regardless of a child's opinions or feelings that they express, the parents just stick to it and don't really have a warm response, if that makes sense, to how the child is reacting. But then within an authoritative approach, we see that the level of responsiveness is increased, where parents then are more willing to consider their child's response to said rules or routines. And so on this chart, as a reminder, a family-centered approach really would fall mostly in the bucket of being more authoritative. I know the bullet points are hard to see, so to read it for you: solves problems together with child, sets clear rules and expectations, and then there's open communication with natural consequences.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah.
Do you just talk it over with your spouse and go, this is the way it's going to be?
Yeah, the question was, what's like the first thing to do? I think, it would be easy for me to just say like, whatever works best for you, right? Because really, whatever works best for your family unit in terms of that first step. But speaking from personal experience, try to get everyone together around the table, share a meal together, whether it's a mediocre meal or a fantastic meal, but just sit together and talk. Like, it doesn't even have to be specifically about the concepts presented, but if you can get everyone around the table and just kind of observe the interactions that you're seeing and observe how the conversation flows, observe maybe who has more authority in said conversation, who's more demanding, where is the level of responsiveness. But speaking from experience, family meals are huge. So if you can just sit around the table and kind of get a synopsis, maybe would be the word, of where's your family at. That would be my encouragement for a great first step.
Okay, anybody else? Emma, thank you. That was awesome.
You're welcome. Thank
really
you all for
awesome.
listening. It means a lot.
And speaking of awesome, December is coming, and we have 2 more Lunch and Learns till the end of the year. The next one is December 7th with Jim and Patty Robinson. They are talking about conflict in your values when the inner compass of your mate points in a different direction. That should be really good, like for a lot of people. And then Dale and Marsha Hummel will join us on the 14th to talk about why marriage matters. So make sure you come on back, finish out the year well, and get ready for a new year. Thanks for coming today. We were so glad to have you, and we'll see you soon. The schedule is about to come out. It's done. The topics are listed, and we're waiting for the printers. It'll come. Okay. Good to see you. God bless you. Thank you for coming today.